Hello, everyone. It's Daz, and I have the pleasure of being joined by old friend Andy Flatt, who has, he has the wonderful role of looking after the Brora Distillery these days. And we're going to be talking about, Andy, and we have talked about with Mitch, is the revival of some of these distilleries that were lost and they were destined to be lost forever. But a few of these distilleries have been revived recently, and none perhaps more famous than the Brora Distillery. I think that's fair to say, is it not?
I think, yeah, very fair to say. I mean, it's always exciting to see, distilleries come back. But I think in general terms, the revival, the restoration of Brora, it's one of the biggest things to happen in whiskey for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
If not the biggest thing.
Yeah, it's a massive project, and it's something that people are so passionate and emotional about as well, are these kind of old distilleries that are coming back to life. I guess, I mean, what is it that your role is there then? A lot of people would think that would be an amazing opportunity to work in that part of the world at a distillery with such a name. But how did you, what are you doing there? And tell us a little bit about kind of how you ended up there.
To be fair, they wouldn't be far wrong. I think genuinely it's the best job in the world.
Yeah.
It's so technically speaking, my job title is brand home host.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I essentially just host, look after the tours, make sure they run well, organize everything for clients and guests coming up.
Yep.
So I look after the brand home in the background as well,
Yep.
kind of admin and paperwork and the less kind of glamorous side. But in general terms, I'm kind of like, I'm the guy that's going to shake your hand at the front gate and show you around and give you the chat and let you taste the drams and lead you through, the history and all these things. So, yeah, but it's not a difficult job in its own way because everybody who comes there already loves Brora. It's not a hard sell to get someone to be excited about coming to Brora because they already are, And it was something we talked about earlier about, people that are coming there that feel they've got a connection with it. There's people who've never ever been there who'll maybe wander through the courtyard and they'll just touch the side of the still house or maybe put their hand on the still and just touch it and they have this connection with the place.
Yeah.
But you've never ever been there. It's this this kind of ethereal thing, and it's just wonderful. And it took me a wee while to get used to it, how someone could be so. I mean, I've seen people with like misting up walking through the gates and stuff because they're just overjoyed to be there. And it's just a pleasure to see that, it really is.
No, it is definitely. I mean, we're going to cover off a lot of talking points tonight, but before we do, we need to get a dram in our glass. I unfortunately, I don't have any Brora in my house. I'm actually not that embarrassed to admit that. That's fine. I think that's a reasonable, normal thing to say. But I do have a distillery that's very close by. I've got a lovely Clynelish 14-year-old here, which I'm a massive fan of. Which is linked to Brora in some ways,
Oh yeah, for sure. I think generally, Clynelish 14 is one of my, if you're going to stock a bar with only 3 or 4 bottles, then Clynelish 14 would be that kind of that one,
Yeah.
And it for me, it has the historical link to Brora, but it also has that link for me that it's just a dram that I really really enjoy.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent choice.
I suspect that's not in your glass tonight.
No, not tonight. So luckily I do have some Brora kicking around. So what I'm drinking tonight, this is a 39-year-old single cask Brora.
Wow.
So this is from our distillery exclusive collection, release number 1.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this is available only from the distillery.
So this is from Brora before it shut. This whiskey. So what's the style like? What kind of character have you got in that one?
Oh, so the thing is about Brora is we've always had this main distillery character, this kind of like waxy, fruity kind of character. But it's kind of, there's been these kind of 2 points in time when they've gone into kind of outlier territory. So you'll have this kind of like heavily peated period through the late 60s and the 70s. And
that's the Brora I've tasted. The Broras I've tasted in the past typically had been heavily peated. Yeah.
The special releases and so on. A lot of these, the heavily peated era. So but there's a few years on either side where we've done this kind of, what we'd call mainland peating or lightly peated, as was the style in those days, And this 82 Brora kind of falls in that category because it returned to mildly peated production in the summer of 1981. So after that, then anything after that August, it's going to be then unpeated, or mildly peated as we call it. So this comes from that era, and it's actually called hidden beneath for the very reason that you've spoken about there. It's what's underneath that smoke. You know, that smoke's that character that's associated with Brora. But we also have this other period when we go into this really kind of earthy, robust styles as well. So to nail down distillery character is quite different because there's these kind of three facets of the flavor profile.
Yeah. You
know, but of
and
course,
is that where the kind of story of the triptych came from? Was it these three elements, I guess, that Brora had? I guess it evolved over time, right? I guess that's what it was about.
Yeah, it's a one-off release, and I think at a time when whiskey marketing, they can, they have stories for everything. Yeah. This isn't some sort of disingenuous stuff that we put together. This is like the three facets of Brora. It's the history of Brora in liquid form in three different chapters.
Yeah,
and each one's been specifically designed to showcase these to their brightest point.
Yeah,
it's just a fantastic liquid to kind of be involved with.
Now, before we get into the, how it was reopening the distillery and all that kind of stuff, when you and I met, you were running a blog, the Amateur Drama, and you were very active in the whiskey community, and I'd bump into you at launch events because I was on the brand side, on the distillery side, and you were writing a lot and sharing your thoughts through your blog, but also a lot of written titles and stuff like that as well. You wrote some newspaper columns and things like that too. So, I mean, how did you make that transition from being the amateur drama into Mr. Brora?
You know what? Like all the best stories, it just sort of happened.
Aye.
I mean, I wasn't involved in the whiskey industry when I was kind of writing. I was kind of moonlighting, as it were.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, I spent 14 years working for the police. So it was just this kind of nice escape to go and pretend to be a whiskey writer and get invited to distilleries. But of course, that just, I don't know, it's like it just led me further and further down the rabbit hole.
And where did that passion come from? Just sort of earlier on, then was that something you just fell into? Did you meet someone that shared a dram with you and you thought, wow, this is a new world I don't know about?
Both of those things. So it's kind of it's a sad story to start with, but it's got a happy ending. So
right,
bear with me for the good.
That's we're going on an emotional roller coaster, bro.
Yeah. So this is like my origin story. This is the whiskey origin story, how it all began. So my father passed away in a good few years now, 2011, and at the point we're in hospital with him, and someone had smuggled in a bottle of whiskey for him. Now, for many years, I'd always known he was a whiskey drinker, but it wasn't so much the drink; it was the appreciation of it. He was an English guy living in Scotland, so he kind of absorbed Scottish culture, and part of that was whiskey. So he wanted to do more, and there's always a few bottles in the house, and he was always so keen to try and get me into it, but I just couldn't. I just found it. I just didn't enjoy the taste, and I mean that's a key thing. If you drink something, do you like it? Yes. In which case, drink more of it. Yeah. So he was always trying me with something like, "Oh, we'll try this one. You might like a peated one, or we'll try this one." And I just, for all he tried, it just never really clicked for me. But there was one night we were in the hospital, and time was short, should we say? And this bottle that had been smuggled in, we were, myself and my father, we were drinking it from these like little plastic cups, and it's the first time.
You wouldn't do that at Brora these days, I suspect.
No. It's been a while since I've had whiskey from plastic cups. Yeah. You know what? There's the appropriate glassware for every occasion,
Mm-hmm.
So we were just kind of having this drama. It had been poured, and I was like, "Oh, geez, I really don't like whiskey." But it was this weird thing without getting too deep. I mean, obviously, this is a very highbrow podcast, so I can talk about philosophy. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
It's this kind of like, I don't know. It's like this kind of, they call it Cartesian dualism. Okay. So it's this kind of idea that there's like a physical body, and then there's this intangible kind of thing, almost like there's the physical body and the soul. Yeah, there's this ethereal thing aside from the physical thing. And there was this moment when I drank the whiskey and I'd enjoyed it. And that's when I realized whiskey wasn't just a liquid. It's not just this physical product. It's the story, it's the emotion, it's sharing it. And there was this moment, it's burned in my brain when I drank the whiskey and smiled And Dad smiled back, and it was at the point that he knew he'd got me. He'd found one. Yeah. I'd enjoyed one, you know. And that for me is when whiskey became like, wow, this is something beyond a beverage. It's not just, there's an ethereal thing that you can't put your fingers, you can't touch, you can't describe. It's just there.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of got a bit out of control after that, you know, just the kind of thirst for, you know, just the kind of thirst for knowledge. And I bumped into some guys at a whiskey festival. It was guys from Edinburgh Whiskey Blog. I don't know. I'm assuming you probably met all of the guys. Nice.
Yeah,
lads.
yeah, of course. Yeah, Chris.
Yes, Chris. Jason as well. And I'd kind of bumped into the whiskey festival, and like all good ideas, when you've had a few drams, I was like, yeah, I'll do one of these. I'll write one of these blog things, because it just seemed like a nice way to kind of be able to chat to people about whiskey, find out about it, and kind of push myself, you know, to know more. You know, because you can't write anything unless you know at least a little bit about it, but you can approach it from the amateur perspective, which is hence the name, you know. It was just this, here are my thoughts at this stage of my the whiskey journey. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but
no.
It does go on one, you know.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I mean, and we met at that time, and we share a passion for sherry. You're a big fan of sherry.
It is your fault that my little cupboard has very, very many different types of sherry in it.
I don't think it's my fault. I can't take responsibility for that.
But to be fair, you opened the door, and I
well.
Yeah. However, we'll settle on that, you know.
Yeah, and we also, and Mitch is the same actually. We share a small passion, much less so than the whiskey side, I would say. But we enjoy a cigar every now and then as well. But you know, and I think it's about flavour, and sherry's got that in abundance. Whiskey's got that in abundance, and it's these little emotional connections that enhance all of those experiences at the same time, right? I mean, if you have a cigar with someone, it's a special moment to celebrate. Likewise with whiskey, and you know, we had sherries up in Inverness. I remember, when was that? It must have been about 5 years ago now or so.
Oh, easily. Yeah. I remember that, because we did that because you were working for White Mackay at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was there was the Dalmore ones were there, and then the sherries that come from the same bodega, and it was just that kind of interconnectedness.
Yeah.
But it was just, for me, when I tried a sherry next to a dram, and even though it was like a big, rich, unctuous, full-bodied dram, the sherry just outgunned it completely. Just with its mouth coating, and I was like, wow, this is like something entirely new. So it just, that was another rabbit hole that I kind of fell down.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a bit cheaper though. It's a bit cheaper sherry.
Yeah,
it's quite pleasant there.
It was that night when I got home from your tasting, I went online and was looking to buy sherries, and I bought a couple of the ones that we tried that day.
Yeah.
And I was like, really, is that a misprint? How can a 30-year-old sherry be that cheap?
I know.
So I bought two of them just in case it was some kind of misprint on our website, you know.
Yeah.
But fantastic. And I think, me and you were maybe similar in that way. We like to pick things apart flavor-wise.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also about having the time. It's like there's a difference between reading a newspaper and reading the news on your phone. It's about having both the same information, but it's absorbed differently. If you have the time to sit and read a newspaper against the rush thing on the phone. And it's like that for me with a lot of like these sort of, you know, consumer products, and the fact that you can take your time with a cigar and enjoy it. And it's having the time to do it, not necessarily doing it itself. And it's the same with sherries and whiskies and coffees, and it's just the analytical course, you know. I can't remember the last time I tried something and didn't kind of analyze it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as a blogger, as you were, that became something you honed in on and actually became very skilled at, and it's something obviously that's probably I'd imagine as doing the role you're doing now, something that stood you in good stead actually for, you know, when you're with clients, they're enjoying very rare, very special single malt whiskies. You appreciate probably more than anybody the fact that you don't want to rush this. You need to sit down, you need to take the time and be present with what's in front of you, because it's very special, right? And that's something that doesn't always happen at distilleries. And I've worked at distilleries that have thousands of visitors that come through every day, and not that we're pushing them through to speed them up, but the reality is there's a tour right behind them. You know, and they need to get out there, get out the still house, get out the tasting room, you know, get onto the shop and get out the distillery. So I mean, you guys are creating something very different at Brora, and it feels like that's a nice environment for you personally because of, you know, your interests.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've kind of concentrated on and what they kind of what we strive towards is just making people feel welcome. You know, it's the home of Brora. It's the brand home. You know, so you're coming into our home, please feel relaxed and welcomed. You know, like I don't wear a tie. It's just nice, relaxed, chilled out. You know, people come in and make you feel welcome. But the beautiful thing there is that people tell me what they want to see and do there. You know, the tour has a flow that when it's got start time and end time. But I can shorten it. I can play with it. We can do different things. So I kind of judge what people really, really want to see and what they want to do. And then at that point, in the first 5-10 minutes of meeting someone, sitting, having a coffee with them, chatting about what they're looking forward to the most, that's when I plan the tour.
Yeah.
You know, so it's
for the guys listening that are going to make their way up to the North Highlands, what is available at Brora for, you know, the whiskey enthusiast, the whiskey collector? What can they do at Brora?
Okay, so our experiences are different in the fact that, you know, we don't have them every day, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe some months in the quieter months of the year, we'll maybe have 4 or 5 in the whole month. You know, maybe in the summer it might be sort of 5 or 6. You know, so what we're offering is small groups, and we're offering people the chance to come in to the brand home. We're not talking about a 45-minute tour here.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, experiences there are, we've got one that lasts around 3.5 to 4 hours, one that lasts around 5.5 hours. So you're there all day, you know.
Right. Okay.
But what that allows us to do is give a deep dive into everything, into Brora's history, its relationship with Brora the village, its industrial heritage, the restoration itself, how it was then, how it is now, what we've done to achieve that. You know, you go into the distillery, and the whole point is you can interact with production. You know, so if you're there at the right time, you can make the spirit cut.
Yeah.
You know, you can, you know, temperate the water in the mash tun. You can start the mash tun. You can do sort of like gravity checks, the washbacks. You're encouraged to get involved with these things. You're crafting the spirit as you're there to get, you know, really into it. You know, so it's just the fact that we can do something like that to bring people in and really get them involved. You know, because one thing Brora attracts is, I mean, whiskey geeks. I say the term whiskey geeks is like it's like a term of endearment for me because I am one myself. So but there's, again, people who come there love Brora. You know, everyone's pretty much on it. You know, they're well aware, but they're very well informed as well.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's a long way to go without knowing where you're going.
It's definitely a destination. That's the thing, you know. So nobody's driving past and pops in, you know. I mean, to be fair, tours don't work like that. We like to book them in advance because we're lucky we've got a great food and beverage partner. So, you know, lunch is part of the day as well. So we have a fantastic lunch, local produce, and so on. So everything's just tailored to make it as bespoke as we can, and just have that lovely, relaxed feeling of just taking our time, you know.
No, it's brilliant. No, it's great. It's great actually to hear just how it is being brought back to life. And you talked a little bit about how it was in the past and how it is now. Just kind of roughly, what kind of changes have been made at the distillery to sort of bring it back in to production? You know, there must have been some compromises or some changes that they went, right, out of the 3 styles that we made in the past, we're going to pick one and we're going to go for that moving forward. You know, what's changed and what's not?
So first thing really is not a lot has changed.
Right.
You know? So kind of working.
That was easy.
That's the question and answer.
That's it, done. We'll move on.
So I mean, we were lucky. We still had the original stills. You know, because the still house itself was in such a state of disrepair, it was impractical to take the stills out. But when you have the original stills, I mean, that's like the beating heart of the distillery, isn't it? You know. But because you know the stills and you see them and see the, you know, the volumes and so on, you can then reverse engineer the whole process to go, right, we need, you know, a wash charger this size, we need so many wash backs to do so many mashes per week, and we need a mash tun this big. But every piece of equipment we have in there is based on what was there before. Like our mash tun is an exact replica of the rake and plough mash tun that Abercrombie's installed in the early 1970s.
Right. Okay.
You know, so everything is the fermentation times, the temperatures of the water and the washbacks, the volumes, that's all taken from Mashman's records from like the 1960s and 70s.
Okay.
The same, the one thing I would suggest that has changed is like energy efficiency. So we use less cooling water, for example. So we're more water efficient. You know, the whole point is we're not trying to make as much Brora as we can as quick as we can. You know, we're making it how they did back then.
Brilliant.
So it's as close as possible as to we can get it, but there's that kind of energy efficiency thing that goes on top too.
Yeah, there's a sustainability angle, and you know, bringing an old distillery into modern times is always going to be a big challenge, and every distillery's fit. Well, every old distillery is facing that as we speak, right? How do you make a 200-year-old building more sustainable? You know, it's very difficult when it's been rewired 100 times, it's been replumbed 100 times. You know, you've kind of got to go back and undo 2 centuries worth of technology and hard work. But the great thing, I suppose, that you have at Brora is that it wasn't operating for a long time. What year was it shut? Was it 83?
83 it shut, yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of around that time that Port Ellen, and there was quite a few distilleries that sort of went into sort of silent modes at that point.
At that point, from Scottish Malt Distillers, SMD, there was 11 distilleries closed, and then 2 grain distilleries as well. But there's a whole raft. I mean, one of my favourite books for flicking through is Scotch Mist.
Yeah, it's a great book. I love that book. Yeah.
If you went round and circled all the distilleries that closed in 1983, it's probably about 70% of all the distilleries in that book, you know?
Yeah.
Just that era in whiskey history, the whiskey loch,
you
know, the change in fashions and trends and drinking styles.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just that period.
Yeah. I mean, that must be quite a nice period, though, to be trying whiskies from Brora, little legacy pieces. I mean, what sort of stands out as a whiskey that you've tried from Brora that will sort of stay on your lips forever, if you like?
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many to pick from, and there's so many different there's the 3 core styles. But if you think back to like the Broras of the early 70s,
right,
72 in particular,
right,
it's like this kind of golden vintage when it was this kind of like earthy, robust style was just so prevalent, and that became what Brora was for a lot of people. So even though we were closed for nearly 40 years, people who were really, really into whiskies, and they were still accessible, you know?
Yeah.
So people would hoard these kind of, these early 70s Broras. And pretty much the reason that we are talking about Brora now is because of those golden vintages, those fantastic years.
Yeah.
That's why. That is the flavour style that most people really, really adore about Brora.
Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because for such a legendary distillery where the whiskies were very highly kind of sought after, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, Brora's, people are scrambling around in the secondary market, and they're looking to buy bottles at a high price, but they know they're probably going to go up in price and continue to do so. When people come and you've got this, it's almost like when a famous musician retires, right? Or a great player retires. Sometimes they come out and they shouldn't have, and do one more gig or play one more game. And, how has that gone down with the kind of Brora lover, the person that bought Brora from the 70s, and they've come up and seen you guys? Have they kind of fallen back in love, another time with Brora almost? Has it kind of had that kind of effect? Or have a few people gone, should have kept it close?
Yeah. You know what? That's a really valid point, actually, and it's a great question. But what I would say is that because we've worked so hard to replicate the process exactly as it was, or as close to it as we can now, and because we put over 250,000 labour hours into the restoration work, the stonework.
It's the stonework I've seen. I haven't been in, but I've driven past and I've come up to the kind of gates, and the stonework looks remarkable. It looks beautiful.
It's beautiful. It really, really is. And that's all reclaimed. So we've reused the same. I mean, the site was listed.
Yeah.
So that's all reclaimed. I mean, it's all local limestone from. There's I think a quarry used to be a quarry only a couple of miles away.
Yeah.
So it's all local stone it was built from. So yeah, and then people see the effort we've put in. It was never the intention to make something that looks, although it does look beautiful. It was never intention to make something that looks good now. It's about what's going to look good in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years for like future generations. So whoever takes over from me, and whoever takes over from person who takes over from me in the chain of master distillers, it's more like this. We've brought it back, and then we're kind of passing it on.
Yeah.
Which is this beautiful. So people see that we're not trying to make whiskey Disneyland. It's not a whiskey theme park. It's not the kind of. And nor is it the Brora Museum, because it's still, it's still got that historical precedence to it, but it's an operating distillery.
It's a working distillery, yeah. Yeah. How many people are up there working then? Just out of interest, is it like what sort of size is Brora now that it's back up and running?
Okay, doke. So we have 5 operators and a master distiller.
Yeah.
And myself and the brand home. That's kind of really about it.
Yeah.
Brora's always been reasonably small in terms of production. I think historically it's never gone over 1 million litres a year. Typically about
still
800.
very boutique in terms of size then. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking at just now, is looking at a production of no more than 850,000 litres a year, which makes it amongst one of Diageo's smallest distilleries as well.
Yeah, it's a small distillery, definitely. I mean, it sounds to me, just listening to you talking and about the production side, it sounds like you've got a good working relationship then with the distillers and the operators up there. It sounds like a nice place to be. You know, it's did they give you keys for the warehouses and things like that? You do. That's good to know. Good to know the next time I'm driving past.
I'll leave the back fire exit open. And you can
Is that right?
But no, that's a cool thing, that when we do have visitors, when they come in and for the part of the tour, is the master distiller joins us for the tour. Yeah. So, you know, Jackie's fantastic, you know. So, you know, she'll come round with us. She'll host the production part of the tour. You know, she'll join in for lunch, it's conversation. So, you know, you're getting time with her as well. And the operators, you get to interact, talk with the operators.
Yeah.
They'll show you how to use the equipment. So it's very much this wonderful kind of team of people who are just, and everybody's so passionate about Brora.
Brilliant.
You know, it's for me, it's genuinely the best job in the world. And all the operators feel the same, and they're super enthusiastic. They just, I mean, you couldn't have picked a better team for people who want to sort of show it off and get people involved. And it's just fantastic.
No, that's good. That's great. I mean, that's what you want. That's the atmosphere you want when you go around these distilleries. You know, you want the guys to have an opinion as well. You know, what whiskies do they like from the distillery? You know, I'm sure some of the guys up there will have relatives that worked in the distillery in the past, perhaps. And what was Jackie's background then? She's the master distiller now. Where did she come over from?
Talisker, she was at for a while.
Okay.
She worked in a whole host of distilleries. Originally, I think from the brand home side of things as well.
Yeah.
So it's just perfect for me because she understands the kind of the brand home and the hosting side. And she's worked with Casks of Distinction as well. She's worked at Royal Lochnagar. She's worked at Talisker. So she's just the perfect person to have up at Brora. You know, to be sort of like public facing, front of house. Just such a nice person as well, and just great crack, you know.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Look, it wouldn't be. We've talked a lot about Brora, and it's really cool to hear the story and stuff. But across the road, there's been quite a lot of work has gone on at Clynelish in recent times, and as part of the Four Corners of Scotland, you guys have restored 4 distilleries to kind of share that story of the contributing malts to the Johnny Walker story and things. And I've been down to Glenkinchie. It's absolutely fantastic. I was over in Islay last week. I didn't get down to Killila, but I've heard it's moving on now, and it's moving at pace, which is brilliant. You've got Cardew, of course, up in Speyside, and you've got Clynelish right up there in the North Highlands as well. So, I mean, that distillery, I've seen pictures. It looks incredible, the bar and things like that, and the wee building that sticks out. And it's obviously a whiskey I'm a massive fan of. What's going on over there? How's things looking? Do you get over there as well for a wee coffee and a wee cocktail?
Yeah, we've got a very good relationship with the staff at Clynelish, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, I think when a lot of people arrive, they don't realise how close the distilleries are.
Aye.
There's genuinely like the width of a road in between them.
It's literally across the road. I mean that seriously. Yeah.
You know, and there's always been that historic link between the 2 distilleries as well.
Yeah. What is the link? So Clynelish is a relatively rebuilt distillery, shall we say, right? But rebuilt in the 70s.
Okay, so for the purposes of just trying to be clear, what we'll do is we'll call Brora as it is now. We'll call that Old Clynelish, right?
This is it, because I don't think a lot of people know the kind of story here.
Yeah. So it's a bit contrived, but bear with me, okay? I'll try and explain it as best as I can. So essentially, Clynelish Distillery is founded in 1819, and those are the buildings that we now call Brora.
Right.
Okay. So over the passage of time, they then commissioned a larger distillery nearby. So it starts building in 67, comes online 68. Yeah. So that's Clynelish. So they give that the name Clynelish. The idea being that they needed to kind of upscale Brora for that wonderful waxy character that Clynelish is famous for. So we were like the OG wax. We had the waxy first, yeah.
Yeah.
They needed to kind of upscale this, and so they built Clynelish to replicate the production process to make more of it.
Got it.
You know, so then for a few months they both work side by side, still producing whiskey, and then Brora kind of goes into like back then they still had the kind of summer silent season, so it's closed over the summer. Yeah, and at this point there's issues with production of peated whiskies for Johnny Walker. So I think there's issues at Kalila, there's a fire, there's a drought, and so on. So they need to start making peaty whiskey somewhere else. So they try a few sites on the mainland, and they find that Brora, without too mumuch tinkering, is perfect for making an Islay style whiskey. Right. So that's it. So it's kind of brought back into production, but to make a peated whiskey. So you've got all those years previously of making mainland peated, and then you start going into heavy peat, for that period to kind of fill that hole in the kind of blending portfolio, because there was a projected shortage. So that's kind of saved Brora the first time, you know. So for a while they operate at the same time. I think it's a matter of months, and so they're called kind of Clynelish A and B, sometimes Clynelish 1 and 2. Yeah,
they confuse things.
But so that one of the key things that when we found out is when Brora Distillery was actually called Brora Distillery, renamed, because the question I get asked the most, other than when will new Brora be released, the second most asked question I get, why did they give the new distillery the old distillery's name and then give a new name to the old distillery? And I couldn't get my head around it because it doesn't make any sense. But from what we found out, because when we've interviewed a lot of the old distillery workers, a lot of the old hands, we brought them in, we've like videoed their interviews, we've chatted extensively.
That must be good.
A lot of the
stories.
Hours and hours, I just sit and listen to the stories. Like a lot of what I talk about when people come is the stories of the old hands and everything they used to get up to, you know. But as best as we could figure, in reality, the people of the village of Brora always called, even though it was Clynelish at the time, they always called it the Brora Distillery or Brora Distillery. They took it in as their own. They named it after their village.
After the village, after the locale,
So when they were looking for a new name, it had always been locally referred to as the Brora Distillery.
Right.
So that's when that's come in, you know. So that was in December 1968. It was renamed as Brora Distillery. So anything pre that date is Clynelish. Anything after that date is Brora.
Okay.
So hopefully that makes it as clear as mud for everybody.
Absolutely, you've cleared that up fabulously. Right, we like to get a few facts out of people from certain distilleries and little bits and pieces that people might not know. Well, that's a great one. I mean, obviously the name of the distillery is a brilliant one. Have you got a few facts that you could blast away that people might not know about Brora?
Okay. So facts they might not know, but without spoiling the tours, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't spoil tours. And make them quite boring so that people don't make new friends in a bar. Basically, that's the drill.
Some pretty dull facts.
Yeah.
I think, you know what? I think being a whiskey geek myself, and these are the things that I want to know and the questions I'd ask. And the things that would, I'd like to have answered. So really, when we talked earlier about the three different styles of Brora in the past, and these three kind of things, we're going to make all three of those styles.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not making one style. Yeah, we are going to have different campaigns throughout the year, making different quantities of these different styles of liquid. So our entire distillery can flex production to these three different styles. Brilliant. If you want to know how we're going to do that, you are going to have to come and visit.
We'll have to come up. Yeah, that's fine. Don't explain. No, it'll be well over my head anyway.
So I mean, we've got a rake and plough mash tun. Yeah. So we talked a wee bit earlier about it. So again, an exact replica, pretty much to the millimeter, of the mash tun that was in before. So obviously the distillery's closed, equipment gets sent elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, but we've had it built using the original blueprints from the original company that built it.
Brilliant.
Made us another one. You know, so it's this again. You could make it easier and just have modern equipment, but no, we've made the old equipment. We've replicated as close as we can. And
there won't be many of those. There won't be many of those knocking about.
Well, I think in general, rake and plough mash tuns, I think there's maybe a handful, if that.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, there can't be many. Yeah,
there's not. But again, we're not trying to make Brora better. We're not trying to modernize it. We're not trying to make it in a modern way. We're trying to make it the way it was then.
Brilliant.
Nice. There'll be no point in replicating the process. You know, we're not trying to pump out as quick as we can. You know.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
It's Brora. You have to pay it due reverence. You can't just, you can't be messing with it. You know.
Yeah.
Interesting fact number 3, because I did check on this today. Because I
all right, okay, here we go. Oh, he's done his research.
Yeah. I've been listening to it, and generally there are 95 staves in Wash Park number 1.
Is that right? Is it?
Yes. Yeah, I counted them for you today.
Yes, I love that. And Mitch is going to be buzzing about that. Oh, I love it, mate. No, it's brilliant to see you, man, and really, really good to catch up. And it sounds like you are absolutely in your element up there at Brora. It sounds like a brilliant place to be, and I mean, to be part of something so historic as well is it must be something that fills you with pride as well.
Yeah, you know, it's never lost on me the magnitude of what's happening there. You know, I think the day that I don't take that for granted, that'll be the day I move. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I love my job.
Yeah. I was going to say, where are you going to move to?
I mean, to be fair, as first jobs in the industry go, I'm kind of setting a reasonably high bar for myself.
I think so, absolutely. Yeah.
But you know what? It's funny because it's such a big project, and generally the eyes of the whiskey world have been on it. And I think some people would see that as like downward pressure. It would, you know, it would weigh you down because there's the weight of expectation on you. Because when people arrive, I'm the face of the project for that 5 or 6 hours that they're there. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant to hear about it, man. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up soon for a dram in real life. I look forward to that very much.
Maybe perchance a cheeky wee sherry as well.
Wee sherry too. Here we go. Class.